So welcome to the 2020 meeting of the Energy Charter Independent Accountability Panel, and thank you for the disclosure from Stanwell. In starting the meeting, I acknowledge the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea and community. We pay our respect to their elders past and present and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people today. So Richard and Stephanie, you may not have met the panel, you haven't met me, so Claire Petrie, the chair, Cassandra Goldie, the CEO of ACOS, and Andrew Richards, the CEO of the EUAA.
Good afternoon, and good to see you.
So I'm going to pass to you in a moment to just get you to make some introductory comments and draw our attention to anything you'd like to highlight in your disclosure, and then open it up for discussion and questions. But before I do, I want to say to you what we've said to the panel has said to all the CEOs, that we acknowledge that this past year has just been unprecedented and a year like no other, with fire, flood and the COVID pandemic. It's obviously had an impact on everyone, and the customers that we're talking about. So, and you'll probably want to talk about that, but I think that needs to be there at the front, I think, just because it has been so huge. So I'll pass to you to talk about your disclosure in whatever way you want. We're obviously interested in the positives and the negatives, where you are, where you're not quite, where you'd like to be, etc. And then we'll open it up. So over to you.
That's great, Claire, and thank you very much for having Steph and I talk to you this afternoon. It's I'm sure it's been a long day for you, and I think we're your last interview, so lucky last, I'm sure, and hopefully we go out with a bang, and then you can have a nice weekend. A gentle bang. We did provide you with our disclosure report. And it really is an opportunity for us to sit back and reflect in preparing that report. I think a couple of key points. We're absolutely committed to doing business in ways which recognise and respond to the needs of our communities and our customers, but also ensuring the long-term sustainability of our business. And that's something we'll probably talk a little bit about later on, because it is becoming more and more challenging for us as an electricity generator in the current market. Our involvement with the Energy Charter acknowledges the importance of considering all customers and our communities in business decisions, and recognising the things we do well, but also recognising there are a number of areas that we can do better. As an electricity generator, we absolutely recognise where we sit in the value chain. We are a publicly owned electricity generator, so we must service Queensland's needs, both as owners, but also as end users, and that is critical. As a generator, while we don't necessarily have direct touch points with mums and dads, we do have a retail business, which services commercial and industrial customers. But we also provide contracts, and we have wholesale counterparties, which we retail to in the form of retailers and other large industrial customers. So we have a range of customers, and that was feedback that we took on board from last year. We defined our customer base very broadly, and I think we've reflected on that and recognised that we probably need to be more focused, and that's certainly what we've tried to do in this disclosure report. Through our membership of the Energy Charter and our relationships with our customers, neighbours, communities, regulators, etc., we really are having a good think about the future of our business and our role and how we need to transition and evolve. And given the market is moving so very quickly, and probably a lot quicker than, changing a lot quicker than a lot of people anticipated, it really means that we're up against it, and we need to evolve and move and respond very quickly. If we look at the last year and it's been a challenge for everybody, but it has really been testament to the resilience, I think, of the sector. But I, as CEO, have been very, very proud of the resilience this organisation has shown, how we've responded to some of the challenges around COVID and a range of other things. But we're very proud of the progress that we've made over the last 12 months. Despite all of the challenges, we recognise also that there is a lot that we still need to do to make sure that we re-establish trust, build trust, and continue to work on those very important stakeholder relationships that we have with our communities and our customers. But we think we've made some progress. We probably have, in some ways, been a little bit conservative in the way we've marked ourselves. But I think that's actually really important, and also a demonstration of the organisation and the recognition that we can only get better. We need to learn. And that is an important part of the membership of the Energy Charter, is actually looking at other organisations, the networking opportunities that provides, and the opportunities to take on board what the other organisations are doing, because that's important. We've got to take an outward-in look, because that is how we are going to get better. So those are probably my introductory comments. I'm happy, Steph's happy.
I'm happy if you answer the question.
to take some of the questions that you may have.
Sorry, just on that, Richard. Stephanie, we can't see you, and for the purposes of recording, I know you need to be COVID safe, but that's probably better if we can see you. That's fine. Thank you. Look, thank you for that. I might actually pass to you, Andrew, first up for questions to Richard.
Hi guys, I'm glad. Hope you're enjoying the sunshine and the freedom up there in Brisbane.
We certainly are. We rub it in, but we are, Andrew.
That's fair enough. I'd do the same if I was in your place too. Look, I obviously know you guys pretty well and Stanwell pretty well, and I know that you're spending a lot of time and effort in embedding the charter principles within the business itself, and that's for a traditional generator. That is certainly a challenge, because you've got a lot of people there who've been there for a long time. So that's a piece of work that obviously it's ongoing. But outside of the business, the third parties that you deal with, your subcontractors and others, in the same way that you would try and embed your own health and safety principles with subcontractors and third parties, are you seeking to do something similar with this customer-centric aspect around the charter? And if so, what's the process that you're undertaking to do that?
That's a really interesting perspective, Andrew, and you're right. I mean, we've got two major contractors that we work with, UGL, who provide a range of services across our generation sites, but then also Downer, who provide our services, or the major part of our services, to Meander Mine. And you're right, we're very, very conscious of embedding our workplace safety requirements and the culture within those relationships. And we tend to work on them more as alliance type arrangements than anything else. I don't think and so I think that's important, and that those relationships are important. But to the extent that we actually they have a relationship with our customers, it's an interesting, I don't know how we'd actually develop that, but where we are working very closely with them. And in fact, in the last year, we actually went out to market around our mine contract services in particular. And we renegotiated our contract with Downer, and that had a range of principles really around affordability and how we got the best out of those arrangements, but more importantly, how we supported their people. We have 450 Downer people that work in the South Burnett. So how are we going to transition when we're actually closing down those operations? So cost was an important aspect, but also transition and business transition. And also how they work within the communities. And we have a very close relationship with both UGL and Downer in the communities that we actually operate, because they have very workforce, and it's important that we have similar community values. So I know I've gone around it in circles. I think the important part is managing affordability and cost, but then also recognizing that both of our major contractors have very significant workforces and presences in the regions that we operate. So it's about engagement with the communities that we operate in and how they support and target the local communities.
Richard, one example of that was the KPIs that we put on the new contract with Downer, which was about them being able to show us at the end of each financial year through their own research, through third-party research of our neighbours and our communities, that they had operated in a way which is good for neighbours and the communities. So, you know, that's things like, you know, dust amelioration and noise and blasting and vibration and all of those things. So we actually expect them to be able to show us third-party research, which from our neighbours and our communities, which shows that they're happy with the way Downer's working with them. And that's another thing we sort of took from our meeting with the panel last year, was that when we, you know, the feedback from the panel was, as Richard said, we were looking too broadly at customers. So our customers to us really are the customers from Stanwell Energy, as Richard mentioned, but also those end users of electricity who live in our host communities with whom we do have relationships and whose lives we can affect.
But I think, Andrew, going back to that point, and really principle 3 is about providing energy safely, sustainably and reliably. And certainly that is our engagement with those major contractors who are a very significant part of our business. It also goes to the smaller contractors who provide, but they're local communities and local contractors to a large extent. And it is, and we deal with effectively the trilemma when we are dealing with them. And it is about them engaging safely, but also supporting our generation portfolio and ensuring it's as reliable as possible. So a long answer to your question.
and the internal piece, it's how's the culture change piece going internally? Is it...
Okay, that's it's a really good point. A couple of things, and I think we've actually had a bit of a good look at ourselves. So, as a Foundation Energy Charter member back last year, we, I think, engaged and actually gave it much of the responsibility for the Energy Charter to Steph's team. Over the last year, we've actually had a good look at it and said, well, that's not the intent. It's actually about using the Energy Charter, the principles within our organization so that it's a whole lot more embedded. So a couple of things. This last year, we did a complete refresh of our strategy. We took a number of views. It was a bit of, I wouldn't say a start from scratch, but it was a complete refresh. And we had a good look at ourselves as an organization and what we needed to be. So really focusing on creating future energy solutions, affordable emissions reduction, benefiting our community and our stakeholders, and then working smart and building capability. So that was a piece that we thought was very important, and in fact embeds a number of the principles of the Energy Charter. And that goes to our culture and where our focus is. Off the back of that, we also did a complete values refresh. When we were merged back in 2011, that was Stanwell, Toronto, and a number of CS Energy sites. We developed values at that stage, which we had a good look at, and they've stood us in very good stead. But we recognized that it was time to refresh those, and we took on board views right across the business. And we've refreshed those to we care, we adapt, and we deliver, which again is about that culture change and recognizing that we need to adapt and respond to the needs of our communities and our customers and stakeholders more broadly. So that I think is happening. We've seen some significant feedback from within the business, particularly discussions around our future and how we need to transition, but also what are we going to be in 2035? And Andrew, that is a real challenge for us. Last year we talked about our shareholder mandate and the restrictions that imposed upon us.
Mm.
We have had a refreshed mandate just before going into caretaker mode. It was something we worked very hard on. And it gives us a bit more flexibility to evolve our portfolio. But the energy generator of today is not going to exist in 2035 or even 2030. And what does that mean for Stanwell? And how do we transition and evolve? And that means our people need to adapt and be flexible. And I know those sound like things that are just rolling off my tongue, but it is critical. And we're seeing it more and more. Your point that we've got a number of our workforce that have been here for many years, and they see this is really jobs for life. And what we're saying now is, well, no, it's about a transition. It's not jobs for life, it's about skills for life. And what can we provide you so that you've got those skills to transition into other roles in the future?
You started to answer my next question, which is about net zero emissions by 2050. And you kind of preempt that and said, well, it could be about net zero emissions by 2035 or even before that, because I'm recognizing that you've got some restrictions around your mandate, but more in general then, and whether you want to talk specifically about Stanwell or just the market and the industry in general, how do we manage that transition without blowing up customer bills or reducing reliability, but also allowing, you know, companies like yours to ensure there is a just transition in whatever way that takes?
Such a complex question, isn't it?
It is. I don't expect a fulsome answer because no one has one. But I mean, what are the initial thoughts around how? Because you're obviously thinking about it.
Oh, absolutely. And you know, that was actually, I suppose, one of the things that Steph and I had to deal with this year was we refreshed our strategy at the back end of last year, and we talked to our board. Now, our board's very interesting. We've got Paul Binstead on the board, who was a director of Clean Energy Finance Corporation. We've got Wayne Swan, Jacqueline King, who's very focused on just transition and where the workforce is going to
Very
head.
sharp social justice agenda.
Absolutely. And then Adam Aspinall, who's an engineer of old, started at Toronto Power Station, but is, again, very focused on where we're going to be. Now, we presented our strategy. They took a look at it and said, well, this is great, but what are you going to look like in 2035? The interesting thing is we also had University of Queensland do a range of research for us this year on trust and levels of trust within our communities, within our employees, and within our near neighbours. And the feedback was, listen, we trust you. And in fact, our communities, it was fantastic, very high level from our communities and very high levels of trust from our employees. But the overriding question was, that's all great, but what is Stanwell going to look like in the future? What is the future Stanwell? The board have tasked us now with trying to answer that question. And what we've done is, and this is becoming more of a strategy answer, I'm afraid, but it does go to the bottom to your question, is we've taken the ISP, we have mined into each of the scenarios. We've looked at those scenarios, selected them, and looked at the portfolios of the future. And then we are taken our business, our strengths, our strategic strengths, or what we believe are our strengths, looked at what competitors are doing, and then defined our portfolio for the future. Now, as we discussed this morning, it is not going to be large centralized generation. We know that. But then what is Stanwell going to look like? And that is the challenge for us, because essentially we have our existing portfolio. And if you think about McKinsey's Horizons model, we've got to focus on that. Our existing portfolios has an essential and critical role to play over probably the next 5 years, 5 to 10 years. It's sunk cost, it's all paid for. But it is important around system security, inertia, all of those things that we provide for free. So how do we continue to provide those, but at the same time evolve our portfolio going forward? And that really is a challenge for us. This year we've written off $720 million of our asset value in our financial statements. because we're looking at the future curves and we're saying, well, there's so much supply in the market, we just can't continue to carry the assets at these values. So I think, Andrew, it really is, it needs to be a planned response. And as much as we get frustrated with AEMO at times, somebody needed to take on that integrated system plan role. They needed to identify where the infrastructure needed to be built. And we need to plan for that. And I think, you know, there is certainly a need to ensure that transmission is built in the right places to support renewables in the future. We also need to recognize that there are services provided by existing generators that need to be compensated for. And we need to gradually transition, and it will happen because our plant has an engineering life, 2037 and 2042. We're pretty certain that those will come forward over time with the velocity of investment that we're actually seeing. And it means that in order to support those renewables coming into the market, somebody has to be funding those system security services, or they need to be compensated for.
Richard, Cassandra, I just wanted to ask, because obviously this is a really tricky area, and you're saying your board's asking you for that kind of plan. Is that actually a concrete piece of work that is in place?
Absolutely.
Yes. So
And at what stage would you say it's at now? Like, does it exist as a document?
Cassandra, we began it. There's a couple of phases to it, which in June, when we got that request from the board.
Yeah.
We will do our final report for this calendar year, and obviously bearing in mind that our strategy evolution process is ongoing. But this iteration, we will report to the board on what we, on the recommendations we're going to make at the end of November, beginning of first week of December, and that will have three parts. There will be what we regard as the three most likely scenarios for 2025, 2030, 2035. There will be a statement of how we see our financial and physical portfolios in 2035, and there will be a plan on how to get there. So we've done the most likely scenarios, and we're working now on the physical and financial portfolios and the plan on how to get there. Okay. In addition to that work on the physical and financial portfolios, we're also working with our broader leadership group and with a number of external stakeholders, because we like to make sure we take that outside-in approach that Richard talked about earlier, to understand some of the more human questions, like if global warming happens at the pace that it may happen at, according to many of the ISP scenarios, what effect does that have on the economy? What effect does that have on politics? What effect does that have on people and on fuel and those sort of availabilities? What does the workforce of the future look like? What are people's values in relation to working? Why might they choose to work for us? What would they be looking for? Those sorts of questions. How do we measure value in terms of what shared value we in 2035 want to create with communities, customers, our people, all of those people. So that's the work that we're doing at the moment.
And so,
go on, Richard. Yeah.
I was just going to say an important part of that is, and it goes to a part of the question Andrew asked, which is around just transition. Recognizing that Toorong Power Station and Stanwell Power Station are in remote communities. South Burnett in particular is a very financially challenged, is probably the way to put it. We're one of the largest employers in the region, and the closure of Toorong Power Station and Meandu Mine is going to have a very, very significant impact on that community.
Yeah.
Rockhampton, not so much. But in that region, in particular in the South Burnett, we probably employ a good 600 people directly through the mine and through the power station. So we're looking at, we again have multiple prongs that we're looking at. It's how we challenge the community and for them to put plans in place to respond to that transition and the employment challenges they're going to have. It's a very agricultural community, but they need to take some of that ownership. Really pushing hard with government, because government needs to take a lead and absolutely has a role in this piece. We are part of a Just Transition task force that was established by Queensland government, but to date it's been a lot of rhetoric, but not a lot of action, I'm afraid.
Mm-hmm.
And then importantly, as an organisation, what can we do to support a transition? And that is really around providing our people with skills that are transferable.
Yes.
So supporting them potentially to find other employment in the region. So if we are able to develop projects that are within the watershed of our existing projects or existing assets, that would be great, and providing those opportunities. But I think we all accept that unfortunately the number of jobs in a coal-fired power station doesn't necessarily equal the number of jobs in on a wind farm. So there are a range of challenges that we've got. And unfortunately, as I said, a lot of rhetoric, not a lot of action.
Claire, I'd love to talk at length actually about this one, because it's at the heart of work that I do in a different context in terms of, future employment and the sort of local regional collaboration about, employment opportunities and with younger people in the communities, and that planning about the skills and training needed. And there might be a few things to hook on that have come out of this federal budget, in terms of some of the local employment plans that are being driven from the Federal Department of Employment. So if you don't mind, Claire, I'm just going to flag that. And if you want to chat about it separately, maybe we could do it, because we are looking for those that are engaged, that really want to get these plans done for the kind of, just transition's been a language around for a long time, hasn't it?
Yeah, but we would be super interested in that, where, as Richard said, really pushing our leaders in South Burnett to get something going, which we've offered to fund. And we, have offered to share our networks and our resources. So absolutely, the more people we can talk to and the more knowledge we can gain from others, the better.
That'd be great, Cassandra.
Thank you.
If you don't mind, Claire, I'll just say separately in my other hat, follow up, because we could possibly do a couple of, links and post those announcements in the federal budget, I reckon. So,
what governments have been really good at throwing policies around that look good, but they've been really bad at how they interact and the just transition component, and actually thinking that just the industry will just fix it all. I'll do the policy, the industry will just fix it all, when really the issues in play are far bigger than the energy industry can manage. And a lot of those things that have been thrown at you are overlapping and contradictory. Do you think there's an opportunity here for the Charter, and particularly around, say, Better Together, for the entire ecosystem of energy to start thinking about, well, how can we be more resilient to the constant change going on in government, and just develop this plan with people like ACOS and others around just transition and looking after consumers on the way through, and making sure we don't blow the system up and people's bills go through the roof?
Sorry, we're both nearly leaping down the screen. That's exactly what we were thinking about in terms of that energy transition, supporting consumers and communities, Better Together initiative. And the logic, sort of what Nevenka and I were playing with in that, was really, how do you, instead of it being a political policy-oriented piece and the eventual withdrawal of coal being as heavily politicised as it is in Australia, how do you actually get the community leaders from affected communities all around Australia, and the industry from various parts of the value chain, and consumer groups and advocates for community and for employment together, and have us share our networks, our intellectual property, our ideas, and then actually make that perspective public, to try to elevate it out of that political paradigm, to actually inject a bit more pragmatism into the conversation?
Well, is there a way too that, governments, in trying to help create more risk for investors, Now, if under Better Together, I'm not, and this is sort of thinking on my feet a little bit, if under Better Together, you can actually work together to ameliorate that risk or to deflect that risk and saying, well, if I can do this, then you guys can do that, and then we can partner on this thing. It doesn't matter what government's doing over here, because we've actually set a system up where the risk is contained.
And Andrew, it is a model. You know, we're going to need government and certainly state governments to care. And you know, that was something we were pushing pretty hard with as part of the Just Transition Working Group. So Sophie Norton sits on that, and we have an interest, or more than an interest. It's an interest, but it's also an obligation, and it's actually the right thing to do to make sure those communities are looked after. And you know, if you go into South Burnett, it's a beautiful area, but gee whiz, that it really is going to struggle when we do close, and we have to get those communities thinking about the future. And so I think our Better Together initiatives, this would be something really concrete and really important that we could point to and we could all latch onto, because I think everybody's got a role to play in this.
And really, we've got two choices. We can do all these things in isolation, and we can be working on helping our host communities to transition, and EA can be working on theirs, and you know, whoever, and CS can be working on theirs, or we can actually share that thought leadership and network with those groups and you know, leverage off each other's, you know, thinking.
So we don't want the energy charter to be a compliance thing. We want the energy charter to be something that has those positive results, that actually has true value. So that's a great area. So sorry, Cass, I did cut you off before.
No, that's fine. Just kind of transitioning through a little bit, but maybe not from that topic, because I think the surveying work that you've done is really interesting. Yeah, it's really given some insights there, and I was actually quite curious about this. On the one hand, the community benefit being very strong, and yet the fairness looking weaker. Did that strike you as something? So if you go to, I think it's in your stakeholder survey, the first one, you've got perceptions of Stanwell's performance.
Yeah.
And you really sort of, you know, you're strong for the community on community benefit, probably related to the employment, but you know, weakens out on the fairness side, and whether you've got any insights there.
A couple of things. Communities, what we noticed, and we sort of knew it already, but their definition of local is different from our definition of local. So our definition of local for Stanwell Power Station is the Rockhampton region. Their definition of local is the village of Stanwell that sits right beside Stanwell Power Station. Yeah. So their idea of fairness is if when we source suppliers, they are from this village of Stanwell, which is also a very, very, very disadvantaged community. So it's difficult to do that. And then the other thing is that we realised again, which we already knew, is that our host communities have very, very, very long memories. So before I started at Toorong 11 years ago, there was a process of buying up some property to host a potential mine for the future. And at the time, the business employed some consultants who didn't necessarily share our culture, and that was remembered, and it came up in that survey. So, yeah.
It's an interesting. Overall, we're very, very happy with the levels of trust. We work really hard on our communities. We recognise that it's a social licence, but we're just such a big part of it. So it's not that we've put a lot of money in. We've only invested just over $300,000 this year, but those are very specific projects supporting our employees and their kids, and it's a very important part of what we do.
Yeah,
so,
and it's our community panel that decides where our money goes.
Cassandra, that interesting point on that graphic as well is just when you talk about long-term focus, our employees, and part of the work we're doing, you can see long-term focus. Our employees thought we were ranked pretty low on that, and that is the future and where we're taking the organisation. which we talked earlier.
Yeah, can I just pick up then on the, because you've obviously do have this very, this investment in the community local relationships and the relationship with the local disaster coordination centres, and is there a continuity of work that you are a part of in terms of disaster resilience, and are you playing a leadership role in the preparedness for this as a sort of a strengthening community capacity? There are some very good jobs in that work, as you know,
yeah.
if you know, build the momentum for the planning as well as for the recovery, you know, for when there are critical events.
I think that's important. So not only do we sit on the local disaster committees, our people also participate in the local SESs. They're part of the local communities. A lot of our people are actually landowners around the power station, so they've got a vested interest. We think that is actually really the strength of our relationship with the community. Also goes to the fact that we don't do fly in, fly out. Our people are actually located in the community, and that is why it's so important. But that's also why we have such an obligation on us to do the right thing for those communities.
Okay, thanks, Claire. Thank you.
Richard, you've given us a very strong theme in terms of just transition for our report, but what would you, from your perspective, what would you call out for us in terms of our report and the things that we should focus on? What would be a couple of the top two things that you would expect to see, that you'd like to see the panel focus on for the next year?
For Stanwell or for the industry more broadly?
Oh, a bit of both, if you like.
I'm just going to, I'm probably going to, I won't stretch the friendship, but I just wanted to mention one thing, and it didn't actually get into our report. And it was, when we look back initially at last year and our first disclosure report, there were a number of things that we took on board, and it was around the definition of customers and how we categorize them, but also the importance of the feedback from our customers. And while it didn't hit our disclosure report this year, we actually have gone out and done an independent survey or taken independent feedback from our various customers. I just wanted to mention that, and then probably we can go to the broader question around what are those themes that are really important. So we've been out to all of our commercial and industrial customers. We've got good feedback so far. The report's not finalized, but there were a couple of things that we're very proud of. Our customers rated our performance across a range of attributes, but 8.4 out of 10 for being fair and ethical in business dealings, 7 out of 8 for being customer focused, and 7.7 out of 10 for being open and transparent in our pricing. And then 7.5 out of 10 for supporting customers facing vulnerable circumstances. So when we actually, Steph and I saw those, and those results only came in earlier this week, it was actually quite an important moment for us, because we haven't in the past necessarily gone out and got that kind of quantifiable evidence, and it's really great to get that back from our customers. There were, however, a number of things that we needed to deal with. One was around the sustainability of our business and our move to renewable generation and lower carbon emitting technologies, which has been a challenge for us because of our mandate. The other was around, I suppose, the interactions, the more formal interactions through internet and our various portals. But the way we've set up our retail business, it basically grew from a garage into something which is a great brand for us. And I think it's certainly a credit for the team, the retail team upstairs, for the work that they do. In terms of, so I just wanted to share that. And so thank you for letting me put that out there. Boast a little bit. And it will find its way into next year's report, most definitely. I think the themes for us are really about, the energy charter is about what we make of it. For us, it's an important learning opportunity networking opportunity. But we can actually get as much out of it as we put in. And I think that really is important. And it is about customers. And if we don't have customers, we don't have a business, and we recognize that. So it is learning from those opportunities. So I think overall, the Energy Charter is about what we really make of it and how we contribute. I think it is about purity rather than the specific measurements this year. It's about the trends, and are we improving or are we going backwards? And I'd like to think that there are certainly areas that we're improving in. And I'd like to also think that the challenges of the last year, particularly the industry's response to the pandemic, and listen, we may have been slow in some areas, but generally I believe that the industry's response to the pandemic has been positive, demonstrating a resilience, but also a recognition that we need to look after vulnerable customers, and we need to look after our customers more generally. So I think those would be the themes. It's then how we can build on those going forward as well. For us, the whole COVID process was really a challenge for us, but really a demonstration of our resilience as an organization. And we were very clear right up front that it was about safety of our people and their families, basically keeping supply on and the lights on through the period, which we've done. And then importantly, looking after our customers and the communities in which we operate. And I think we've been able to demonstrate that. But there's a lot of work still to be done. And to Andrew's point, this whole transition and potentially the cost of the transition could be significant if it's not managed well. The ISP in itself, the investment to make that happen is going to be significant. And unfortunately, if you look back on the past, there are certain parts of the industry, retailers in particular, that have had to face the brunt of it, brunt of investment in transmission and distribution over the years, and that was principally from 2005 through to 2012. And then the generators more recently, with generation coming off and supply-demand balances being a challenge. I think it's recognizing that there's a whole value chain and we've all got a part to play. And sometimes it is a very emotive and political subject. It's a political football, but we need to be united as an industry if we are going to transition successfully through to 2035.
And Richard, you're right that there is a significant cost in that transition, but there's a significant cost in not transitioning as well. And I think, in so many ways. So,
Claire, I think I absolutely agree with you that it's happening. The transition is going to happen. It's how we manage it appropriately. It can be done randomly and cost a lot, or it can be done and planned properly. It needs to be involved, and we need to be united.
Well, that's a really good note on which to end. I think we have run out of time, but unity, I think, is the order of the day. So that is a good note. Look, thank you very much for your disclosure and the discussion today. That's been most interesting and helpful. And we'll see you again after our report is finalised.
Excellent.
We look forward to it. Thank you for your time.
And
Thanks,
Claire,
Claire.
it's got to be beer o'clock, surely.
Thanks.
Well done. Long day.
Richard and Rebecca. Stephanie, thanks.
Thank you.
You.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye, bye.